Hello and welcome back to another episode of Mr. V's Camping Chair Chat. My name is Mr. V and I'm currently sat in a camping chair under a cherry tree. I'm told it's a cherry tree when I was doing my research. I was hoping it would be more pink. For those of you listening audio only, I'm sat under a tree which has no leaves at all. I'm told apparently there's this thing called seasons and you only get the pink leaves in a certain season. Apparently the weather changes at different times of year. I don't go outside, so I don't know these things, but trees can look different. That sounds made up to me. Anyway, I was hoping to sit under this cherry tree, at the upcoming races, the Japanese Grand Prix, Japanese vibes, lovely stuff. But we just have a tree that may as well just be dead. So that's nice. Anyway, I am sat here. It is also the off week. We had the Chinese Grand Prix last weekend. We've got the Japanese Grand Prix next weekend. This weekend, no Formula 1. A bit of a rest. Unless you, of course, work in Formula 1 media, because there is no rest for the wicked. We need to talk. We need to talk specifically about Red Bull. We need to talk about the Red Bull Young Driver Program. Actually, specifically, we need to talk about the leadership of the Red Bull Young Driver Program. Unless you have been living in, I don't know, a fallout shelter or deep beneath the ocean in a submarine, you may have seen the news this week that Liam Lawson, after 2 races at Red Bull Racing, has been demoted back down to Racing Bulls, V-Carb, AlphaTauri, Toro Rosso, whatever you want to call it, and has been replaced by long-time Racing Bulls driver Yuki Tsunoda, now his 5th season of Formula 1 has finally made it up. God. So yes, it didn't last long for Liam Lawson. Merely 8 days as a racing driver. He obviously did Bahrain testing and stuff, so he was there for a couple of months. But from the Australian Grand Prix to the lights out at the Chinese Grand Prix, just over a week. That's insane. Obviously, many people jumped on this to break the news as soon as possible last week. Reactions, what does this mean for Lawson? What does this mean for Tsunoda? What does this mean for Red Bull? Yada, yada, yada. I'd like to take a slightly more measured approach. We've taken stock now. The dust has somewhat settled. I think it will not be fully settled until at least after the Japanese Grand Prix, and that depends on the performance of both of these drivers and Red Bull as a whole. But I thought we should chat about what does this mean specifically for Red Bull. So obviously, Liam Lawson jumped in this car. Bahrain testing, there were some rumours that he was quite a bit slower than Max Verstappen, his teammate. We then get to Australia. It's a tumultuous weekend. We have lots of crashes in practice with our multiple rookies. Ollie Behrman decided he doesn't want to do free practice. So we didn't get all that much practice running. And also Red Bull, it's important to note, didn't do a whole load of laps in winter testing in Bahrain. I want to say they did the least because they had a number of problems with their car. So they had the least time to both get used to the car and let the drivers get used to the car. Tumultuous Australian Grand Prix, optimum conditions for qualifying. It shall be said, where Liam Lawson qualified at P19, but then took a pit lane start. Then very wet, stormy race. Isaac Hadjar goes off on the formation lap, 2 cars off on lap 1. Many things, lots of drama. Liam Lawson does not make it to the end of that race. He crashes out in the second half of the race, spins out on the changeover between wet and dry tyres, as did multiple other drivers. So you can't really say that that was him having an absolute, shocker of a weekend, because he did the same thing as Fernando Alonso. And Fernando Alonso is widely regarded to be okay at driving cars. So yeah, tumultuous Australian Grand Prix. We then get to the Chinese Grand Prix. Lawson is again not fast. I'm not going to talk too much whether he was struggling or not, but it's safe to say, due to the timing sheets, he was not fast in qualifying at the Chinese Grand Prix. Qualifies P20, slowest of the lot. The team then elects once again to change multiple components on his car to give him basically a whole new setup. He starts on the pit lane again. In the race, he does make up some places due to the inherent pace of the Red Bull compared to the other cars at the back of the grid, Saubers, Alpine, Haas, those kind of people. So he does make up some places, and due to multiple disqualifications, he does finish the race P12, which is just outside the points. Is not great for Red Bull, but it's not a terrible shocker. He didn't finish last on the road. He didn't finish, P16. You know who did finish P16? Yuki Tsunoda, but I'm not saying that's Tsunoda's fault. Racing Bulls, as a team, as a strategy team, had a shocking weekend in China, so that is not on Tsunoda. His front wing exploded. Anyway, so Liam Lawson obviously had 2 pretty bad weekends, but I will say, it's not crazy. He wasn't like slamming his car into the side of other people. He wasn't doing like highly erratic maneuvers. Jack Doohan, he didn't look like insanely bad or insanely unprepared for Formula One, and obviously he looked fine last year in the Racing Bulls. He just looked like he couldn't drive the car, and by all reports, the car is hard to drive. I maintain that I give him a pass as a rookie. He's been in that car for 2 races, only has done 6 or 8 races in total for Racing Bulls. It's a racing driver's job to drive racing cars. So the more experience you have, the more able you should be able to adapt. He should be able to adapt, but I'll give him a lot more lenience than someone like Sergio Perez. But, you can make the argument he should be able to just get in and drive anything at a decent pace, and he didn't do that, and that's fair to say. But 2 races, to be dropped down after 2 races is ludicrous. Like, for all we know, for those 2 races, he could have had a cracked chassis. He could have been ill. It's only 8 days. He could have had like a stomach bug. There's so many different factors. 2 races is such an unbelievably short amount of time in Formula 1. In the same amount of time, Fernando Alonso has performed worse. He crashed out to Australia and scored no points in China, I want to say. DNFing, in fact. So if we're going on a 2-race basis, Fernando Alonso should obviously be booted out of Formula 1. It's such a crazy short amount of time to evaluate anything. Yeah, you got to perform, you got to be on it straight away. The sport moves fast. It's got a short-term memory. It's only as good as your last race. But, come on. This is insane. And if we're only ever going to give people a two-race stint, there's times when people like Lewis Hamilton have had 2 bad races back-to-back. Should he have been booted out of Mercedes? No, it's just insane. It's absolutely insane, short amount of time. We also need to talk about the Red Bull driver situation, the musical chairs that goes on between the 2 teams, the organisation of the driver academy, their ability or inability to actually bring this enormous load of drivers up, find someone suitable to drive alongside Max Verstappen. For me, the most damning thing in this whole thing is on Red Bull. The team is on the management of that team. Helmut Marko, basically, it's obviously not just him. There's talent scouts, he would have advisors. Christian Horner has a say in it, and other key individuals within Red Bull Racing obviously have a say in who goes in that car, but the management of the driver program has to be addressed here. This is shocking. So obviously, in the last couple of years, we've had Lawson come in, gone up, gone down now straight away. Before him, we had Ricciardo, obviously kind of washed out of McLaren. Red Bull Racing picked him up to put him in the second team, where he was quite convincingly beaten by Yuki Tsunoda. Before that, we had Nick de Vries. And here's some comparison for you with how crazy this is for Liam Lawson. Nick de Vries famously was brought into the team and immediately was then basically insulted by Helmut Marko, was immediately slandered in the media for being not good enough, too slow, having too many issues. Nick de Vries lasted 10 races in AlphaTauri. 5 times as long as Liam Lawson. And in my head, he was there for a crazy short amount of time. And 10 races is a short amount of time. It's not even half a season anymore in Formula 1. And he was there 400% more than Liam Lawson. Insane. Obviously, before this point, Red Bull just trying to find someone who can drive alongside Max Verstappen. Sergio Perez couldn't do it. Alex Albon couldn't do it. Pierre Gasly couldn't do it. Ricciardo could do it, but then again, Ricciardo was there before Max Verstappen, and so he was much more ingrained in the team and in the development of that vehicle. I do not believe for a second if you threw Ricciardo back in that he would be on the pace of Max Verstappen. I think at this point the car has changed so much since he was last there that he would also struggle and get destroyed by Max Verstappen. Not going to talk about the technical side of the car. It seems that the car is difficult to drive, but that's a whole different discussion, whether they should or should not make it easy. But Red Bull is not fostering an environment where it's giving its drivers long enough to learn these things, to learn the car. It's not giving them long enough to get comfortable with the mechanics of the vehicle or to get comfortable in their position of a driver. It obviously, by design, is a very high-pressure environment where you perform instantaneously, because if not, there's 5 other junior drivers ready to take your seat. And, that kind of pressure works for some people. Some people are like, I'm gonna prove that I'm the best, and you show them the competition that makes them go faster. But that can only go so far, and clearly lots of these people who have been coming through required a bit more of a stable environment, less threat of someone taking their seat, less curmudgeoned racist Austrian program director. I keep calling Helmut Marko racist. I don't know, but he has made multiple incredibly problematic quotes to the press in the last few years, which is why I say that. I don't want to get done for slandering, but the evidence exists, let's say. So, these factors there make this an incredibly unfriendly environment to be operating in as your day-to-day job. And, pressure can push you a long way and encourage you to perform, but it seems that last little bit, maybe the drivers just need something a bit calmer, a bit, dare I say, friendlier, to be able to just settle into the team, learn the car, pressure off, just tell them, you got the whole year. They also did that with Albon. He had half a year at the end of 2019, and then was given all of 2020. They obviously said that he would be there to the end of the year. He still had the pressure of knowing that if he didn't perform, he was absolutely out of the team at the end of 2020. I'm sure that was a discussion behind closed doors. Red Bull is not giving its drivers an environment to get comfortable, to get up to speed. Max Verstappen got the golden child treatment. He was the team favorite right from the go. He would have had pressure on him at the start, but obviously he hit the ground running, did well, and then the pressure was off because suddenly he was the benchmark. And, you could just say for these other drivers, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, Sergio Perez, if they had just been better, then the pressure would have been off. But you are being compared against the greatest driver of this decade, arguably one of the greatest of all time. I think we can already safely say that Max Verstappen is, top 10 greatest of all time, if not top 5 or higher. It's a high bar to reach. You can be one of the 10 best drivers in the world currently, but that only puts you, that might even put you on the podium in Formula 1. Maybe Red Bull just need to ease off their drivers a little bit. And so I wanted to talk about the Red Bull Driver Academy and what this recent swap with Yuki Tsunoda probably means for that. I can only imagine this is not a good look for Red Bull's Driver Academy. If I was a young driver now and I was approached by multiple teams, Red Bull Racing, but also, let's say, the Sauber Academy, McLaren Academy, I would not be going with Red Bull. Why the hell would I go with Red Bull? You've got the opportunity where you can be in one of these other teams, and it's much more focused down. There's only a couple junior drivers, and so if there is a seat available, you're much more likely to get it. The pressure's not there. Or you can go with Red Bull, who historically have provided more support, more financial support to go through Formula 3 and Formula 2, but at the same time, there's 6 other idiots in Formula 2 with you, the multitude of Red Bull cars on the grid in Formula 2. Any one of them might get the call up for the one available seat at Racing Bulls. Why would I go with Red Bull Racing? And honestly, even if we just look back in the last few years, I think it kind of shows Red Bull is not getting the best talent in the junior series. They are very good at or have been, at least up until a couple of years ago, very good at bringing people into Formula One. The people they do bring in do then do well. They are good talent scouts, don't get me wrong. They obviously brought in Max Verstappen, but on top of that, Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, Carlos Sainz, earlier on, Sebastian Vettel, Daniel Ricciardo, all had great Formula One careers, all very good drivers. So they are good at finding talent. But at the same time, there's many other people who were signed to the Red Bull Junior Academy who obviously just got to Formula 2 and then had their dreams crushed. And in the last few years, the throughput hasn't been there, and they also have not been really signing the best F3 and F2 drivers. Like, I was looking back, so I was wondering when was the last time that a Red Bull Junior actually won Formula 2, and I was surprised to learn they've never done that. The last time that a Red Bull Junior won the highest junior series below Formula 1 was back when it was GP2. It was Pierre Gasly in 2016, 9 years ago. Since then, we obviously had Leclerc 2017, Ferrari Driver Academy, then George Russell, Mercedes, Nick de Vries, I guess officially McLaren, but obviously very embedded with Mercedes as well. We then had Mick Schumacher, Ferrari again, Oscar Piastri, Alpine. You got outdone by the Alpine Driver Academy? Really, Red Bull? Felipe Drugovich, who was unsigned at the time of his title, was then, after his championship, signed by Aston Martin. But don't forget, he was not in a driver program when he won Formula 2. Pourchaire with Sauber, and then Bortoleto with McLaren again. So, like, every other top team has had multiple drivers win Formula 2, and Red Bull has never done it because they're not getting these top drivers, because these other teams are operating in a much different way, where they're only really taking one or maybe two Formula 2 drivers, and so they can approach a very promising driver and be like, we want to sign you because you're the best, and if you agree to come with us, all our focus will be on you. And if there's a seat available on Formula 1, you will get it, basically, which is a much more promising prospect. And so Red Bull is then kind of left with the other guys, like people who are top 10 in Formula 2, don't get me wrong, we've had some very good prospects like Yuki Tsunoda and like Liam Lawson, but they're not like the best of the best in Formula 2, are they? They're not regarded as future world champions in the same way as potentially an Oscar Piastri, a George Russell, or Charles Leclerc. And I do certainly believe that this recent Lawson debacle is only going to make that worse for Red Bull. Like, the pressure was there, and the chances of getting a stable Formula 1 seat with Red Bull were low. If you're a junior driver now, it's clear to see that those chances are even lower, which makes it even less likely that you would want to sign with Red Bull. If they're your only option, then yeah, you go with it. But if you're a top driver, I am for sure I'll pick Sauber. Honestly, I would go with Sauber over the Red Bull Racing Junior Academy. Sauber Academy, mind you, is very good. Sauber Formula 1 team, not very good, but the Academy is great. So yeah, I would not be going with Red Bull Racing unless they were my last resort, my only option. And this can't be good long-term for Red Bull, for the Formula 1 team, because, you know, we've got Hadjar and Lawson at Racing Bulls now, but how long are they both going to be there? Till the end of this year, maybe 1 or 2 more years. But who are they bringing through next? They've got Arvid Lindblad, all signed up in the wings. Christian Horner's golden boy. Christian Horner's answer to Kimi Antonelli. So they've got Lindblad lined up, and yeah, I'm sure he will pop up in a Racing Bulls or a Red Bull in probably the next 2 or 3 years' time. But beyond that, what depth of quality are they getting through anymore? Because they're making it incredibly unattractive. So yeah, I worry about this. And personally for me, the blame, if someone needs to be blamed for the Lawson situation, has to go on the management of the Red Bull Young Driver Program and the Red Bull Just Driver situation in Formula 1. People obviously talked about whether Lawson should be in Red Bull, whether Yuki Tsunoda should have just been put up over the off-season instead of Liam Lawson, which I think is probably true. I mean, there was talk of Liam Lawson having more upside, and that may well be the case. Whatever you may think, over the off-season, when Red Bull made the decision to put Lawson up into Red Bull Racing, they would have made that decision based on something, simulator times, their very short stints in the Red Bull car in like tyre testing or, young driver FP1 tests. They don't give them much time in that car to evaluate them and for them to get used to it. But they have some stuff in simulators and whatever. So this decision must have been based on something. I hope, Red Bull. I hope you aren't just like spinning a big wheel with loads of names on it. It was based on something, and they've gone back on this decision immediately. What was the decision based on then? You're just saying that your decision was entirely wrong, that your evidence you were using is wrong, or that over the off-season, it was just a guess. Which one is it? Because neither option is good. Like, clearly the data they're using is bad. Your data is bad, Red Bull. So yeah, it begs the question, why did they even put Liam Lawson up in the first place if they were so ready to just drop him, to just be like, I've never seen this man in my life. Lawson, who is that? I've never heard of him. They had absolutely no willingness to defend him at all. No willingness to be like, oh, let's give him time. Well, actually, it's bizarre because after Australia, Helmut Marko, of all people, was quoted as saying, we can't start evaluating the drivers yet. They need 5 or 6 races at least before we start these discussions. 7 days is a hell of a long time in Formula 1 because he changed his tune real quick. What was the decision based on over the off-season? Because now they're all in going, oh, Tsunoda is clearly the better prospect. How did you not know that like 2 months ago? It's insane. What are you doing? And even before that, why did you put Nick de Vries in? It begs the question then, like, Nick de Vries was taken off the back of one performance in Monza, which was fine. It was good. He did a good job. But like, they completely disregarded all the data they had on various young drivers in Formula 2, yada, yada, yada. And they just watched from the sidelines Nick de Vries drive a Williams in Monza and said, yep, we'll sign him. Are we literally deciding drivers like with a dice roll? It looks like they're playing D&D and they've got like a table, roll a dice. Oh, that's a 7. Who does that? Nick de Vries. Stick him in the car. It seems to be as close to random as it possibly could be. Like, what are you making decisions based on? I can only assume that a heavy element of this is political. Obviously, sponsor money plays a huge role. There's been reports of, now that Tsunoda's moving up to Red Bull, Honda is increasing their sponsorship to Red Bull. It's reported that previously they were paying 10 million for the year, and they've increased that to 20 million, so a 10 million bump. Presumably, Liam Lawson came with some sponsors also. Who knows how much their total package would have been worth. And the same could be said for Nick de Vries previously and other drivers. Obviously, Sergio Perez brought tons of sponsorship money. Famously was somewhere in the region of £30 million a year. But if you're making decisions based purely on sponsorship money, that's fine. That is fine. But then don't publicly attack your driver. Or it's like, let's say, with like Lance Stroll in Aston Martin, slightly different because, slight family connection in the team. But I maintain that Lance Stroll does have some talent, but you could make a valid argument to say he's maybe not the most deserving of drivers for that seat. Formula 1's not about who deserves it. It's based on loads of other stuff. But if it was purely based on merit, sure, maybe other people should be in that Aston Martin over Lance Stroll. But that's not what the decision's based on. And then Aston Martin don't go and attack him. They don't go and say, oh, Lance was just not good enough. Because that's not what they're making the decision. And that's fine. At least they just admit to it. If you've made a decision to take however many millions off some New Zealand sponsor, that's fine. Admit to that. Don't then come out in the news and be like, well, Lawson's, whatever idiot put Lawson in this car made a huge mistake. You're the idiot. You put him in the car. Don't slander him then. It's just ludicrous. So yeah, I really question Red Bull's decision-making. I hope Red Bull is questioning their own decision-making. I hope they're taking a good, long, hard look in the mirror after this one and really, really evaluating their processes in driver development and driver selection, because it's just not working. It hasn't been working for a very long time. Yeah, it's difficult to get someone who can drive that second Red Bull car. Yeah, it's basically an impossible task to find someone on the level of Max Verstappen. But I really feel like you could have done better than this. You could have got someone closer than this. So many options have been available in the last few years. Carlos Sainz was obviously available for a little while. Who knows how willing he was to go back to Red Bull, but he was there, and money talks. We've had other people, they could have made a play for Oscar Piastri back in the day when McLaren did. Things like this, or even Lando Norris. I for a couple of years said it would have made loads of sense for Lando Norris to go and partner Verstappen at Red Bull. In reflection, that maybe wouldn't have ended so well for Lando Norris. So probably best that he didn't, but they could have dangled a big old carrot, a carrot filled with millions of pounds in front of him, and it probably would have worked if that carrot is big enough. But instead, they've continued with their flawed system, and then been upset that it's not working. So yeah, to conclude on this whole thing, not a good look for Red Bull Racing, not a good look for the Red Bull Junior Driver Program. Not that this situation needs to blame anyone, but I do believe that Liam Lawson could and should have been given more time in that Red Bull car, and it is not his fault that he's been demoted. I place the blame on the management of the Red Bull driver situation. So if they want to improve, my recommendations to you, Red Bull, is go away, look at what you're doing and why you're doing it. Make some changes. It's not working. We should, now talking about this, come on to the facts and ask, what next? What next for Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda? Firstly, I would say both Tsunoda and Lawson victims in this situation. This is good for neither of them. Really, I said last week, this is like a crown of thorns, a poison chalice for Yuki Tsunoda. Maybe he's on the level of Max Verstappen, but I find that to be highly unlikely. And so much more likely he's going to be struggling in that seat. Potentially, he's going to be slower than he was in the Racing Bulls. But even if he's fast in the Racing Bulls, if he's still got a gap to Max more than, 0.1 in qualifying, it's not going to be long until the speculation starts up again. Did Red Bull make the wrong move? Will Lawson go back up? Will Hadjar go up? Because that's just how this driver's seat works. And so it's an almost impossible task for Yuki. It's like, be as good as one of the greatest drivers we've ever seen, or get slandered daily in the media with zero job security. So that's fun. That's great. I definitely don't think Tsunoda would have chosen this if he was given the choice. So yeah, not a good situation for Yuki Tsunoda. I do believe he will be... What's the right word? I don't think we're going to see the same level of struggle as of Lawson, just because Yuki Tsunoda has spent more time in Formula 1, and I do think the team will be more patient with him. So I don't think he'll struggle to the level of Liam Lawson, but I do still think we are going to see him struggling. I would imagine we would see Tsunoda giving similar kind of performances to Sergio Perez of the last couple of years. Quite consistent Q2 exits, regularly finishing 5+ positions behind Max at the end of the race, that kind of thing. I can't really see him being any closer to Max. That's not good. So I really feel for Tsunoda. It begs the question, what does he do going forwards? Even coming into this year, Tsunoda has been distancing himself from Red Bull more and more. He had a change of, talent management over the off-season. Honda is obviously breaking away slowly from Red Bull now that Red Bull is making their own powertrains and partnered more with Ford than they are with Honda. They're still connected to Honda, but less and less. So it's distancing, and it certainly felt like Tsunoda wasn't going to be in the Red Bull organization for too much longer. Obviously, rumours that he might go to Aston Martin to replace if Lance Stroll decides to leave Formula 1 or if Fernando Alonso decides to retire. There are maybe some other options for Tsunoda, but certainly the Aston Martin looks like the most promising one. So Helmut Marko, even talking to Formula1.de, has said that Tsunoda will be in this Red Bull seat until the end of the year. Don't know if I trust that fully, but there we go. But at the end of this year, personally, if I was Tsunoda, I would be looking to change teams. I would not want to be in this team any longer because I don't think this is going to be an easy year for him. I don't think it's going to be a very fun year for him. So I would be looking at my next move already if I was Yuki Tsunoda. For Liam Lawson, he's moved down. Seeing out the rest of the year in Racing Bulls is not the worst situation for him, because there were rumours that he could have just been out of Formula 1, replaced by Colapinto or someone else in the Racing Bulls. So good for him that he's got this seat. And obviously the Racing Bulls is looking okay in the first 2 races this year, particularly in qualifying, not so good in the race. And obviously they've got some strategy mishaps which they need to overcome. But being in that car, which is at least decent in qualifying, is a decent opportunity to prove yourself once more. If I was him, once again, I wouldn't really be looking to stick in the Red Bull organisation for too much longer after this. Particularly if at the end of this year, let's say Tsunoda decides to move on to Aston Martin, and then Lawson gets the call up again to go to Red Bull Racing. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on me. No, wait. Whatever the quote may be. But if I was Liam Lawson and I did get the call up to go to Red Bull Racing once more, don't take it. Don't go back to the abusive ex. Oh, I'll be different this time. I learnt my lesson. No, it won't. Because if he were to go up for 2026, there would still be Isaac Hadjar waiting in the wings at Red Bull, most likely. Potentially even we would see Arvid Lindblad on the grid at that time as well. Oh my God, and if he put a single foot wrong, then it would just be the exact same story again. So I would imagine Liam Lawson would also be looking for his opportunities outside of the Red Bull driver organisation. Don't know what opportunities may be open to him, but you never know what might open up. There's obviously talks of Jack Doohan's career being at risk, Franco Colapinto going in. I currently am not on the Colapinto hype train. I think he was impressive at times at the end of last year, but at the other end of the spectrum, he was very erratic in his ability to not crash, and obviously crashed a lot for his short stint in Formula 1. So, you know, let's say in a few races or halfway through this season, Doohan is swapped for Colapinto. I wouldn't be entirely surprised if Colapinto is then dropped at the end of this year. So, you know, there might be opportunities there. There might be opportunities... I don't think there'll be too many other opportunities, not going to lie to you. But, you know, there's something. Or he could just move on, go to Le Mans, whatever. That might just be a much more enjoyable way to spend your career. So, yeah, I can only see this move as kind of pushing both Lawson and Tsunoda away from Red Bull, ironically. So, once again, not good for the Red Bull organisation. I hope this is a lesson to them both, not to trust Christian Horner and Helmut Marko and all the other people involved. And just get out. It's just a toxic relationship, so just get out. Performance predictions for the year. As I said, I think Tsunoda will struggle. I think he will struggle less than Lawson, but I don't think he's going to be entirely solid because he's been getting more consistent in the last few years, but Tsunoda has been peaky in performance, and even up against his counterparts of Lawson and Ricciardo before that, it would kind of go in periods. Tsunoda seems to go in like sort of long-term waves. You'll have like 1 or 2 months where he's in very good form, but then he will follow that up with like 1 or 2 months where he's in really not very good form. Whereas some drivers are very peaky, kind of race to race, have a great race and a bad race. Tsunoda is more long-term. Yeah, overall, I could see him having a bit of a struggle this year. Time will tell. I honestly think Liam Lawson will do quite well in Racing Bulls. I think the comparison against Isaac Hadjar is a good one for him because Isaac Hadjar has looked promising so far this year. I said either last weekend or the weekend before that for me, Hadjar is with Antonelli currently is the 2 most promising of our rookie class. So for Lawson, I think actually that comparison to Hadjar is a good one because if he can outperform Hadjar, that reflects well on him. He kind of has the best opportunity possible to do that because he's got more races with Racing Bulls than Isaac Hadjar does, and seemingly it's a very easy car to drive and a very quick car. It has the opportunity to do some, like, you know, surprise qualifying performances. So actually, it's not a bad situation for Liam Lawson. I think he will be kind of equal in performance to Isaac Hadjar. I can see both of them scoring points, not consistently, just due to the race performance of that car, but I could see them getting the Racing Bulls car up into P... kind of like 7 in the Drivers' Championship, maybe scratching on P6, which is a very good result for that team. And so actually, I could see Lawson having a pretty good year, all things considered, if he just, like, you know, puts this behind him, has a quite few races, solid performance, close to Hadjar, or better than Hadjar. Put it behind him, I could see him having a decent year, so we shall see. Japanese Grand Prix is up next. It's another early one for all you people in the UK and Europe like me. I think it's 6 AM UK time because we just had the clocks go forwards. Well, I guess it would have been 5 a.m. if we didn't do that, so that's probably for the best. I will be back. The podcast should come out normal time again, overnight Sunday night next weekend, and then, midday on Monday on video form. Catch me then to talk all things Japanese Grand Prix. This is obviously going to be a talking point again next week, because particularly if Tsunoda doesn't have a good weekend, it's going to be a story. It's going to be all over the news headlines. So yeah, catch me then. Bit of a shorter one this week. Hope you enjoyed. Enjoy the sunshine, I suppose. I mean, if it is sunny, I guess. Apparently, it's not the same weather the whole way around the world. I never go outside, so I don't know these things. No one tells me anything, honestly. But, have a nice April. Have a nice April. I've been Mr. V, and I'll Mr. C you later.